All right. So there's a whole series of movies from the 50s or 60s called I Was a Teenage Werewolf or I Was a Teenage Vampire and this kind of thing. So I thought this would be really cool to call it I Was a Teenage Fundamentalist.
I like it.
Yeah.
The shoe fits.
Yeah. And it can go beyond fundamentalism and it can go beyond our teenage years, but I think that's a good place to start because that's where it started for us, right?
It did. 1989 for me. I was 17.
Okay, yeah. So for me, it was 1984, maybe even 83. There was some smatterings of it. No, but I think it was 84. So yeah, I was 13, turning 14.
Wow.
Yeah, so quite young. So why don't we start in saying that what we're not trying to do with this whole podcast, which is we're not trying to make this a big negative fest.
No.
But at the same time, we're not afraid to be negative. Right?
Well, I think negative in the frame of being reflective.
Yeah.
And the fact of where we are in our life. You pull forward a fair bit of life experience to contextualise the stuff that's happened. And we're in a place of probably still, it's lifelong learning, isn't it? And your context changes throughout your life. So
yeah.
I guess we want to be true to what has happened. And what our experience was and is to this day.
Yeah, sure. And for context, we are now in the second half of our lives, which would be fair to say. I don't know if you've thought about that, but I have.
Yes.
Certainly in the second half of life. And so we're looking back on these years with a lot more wisdom and maturity. We talked, didn't we, about, before we hit record, about do we want to say where we're at now in terms of, religious belief and spiritual belief? And I thought, let's hold that back.
Yeah. I'm, to be completely honest, I'm not sure where I am. I think it's something that, for me, it's constantly unpacking and it's constantly redefining in some sort of way, and not in an effort to redefine, but being redefined by the reality of where I am in life. So.
Yeah, cool. Okay. So people are listening to this, if you're a Christian or religious somehow, don't be turned off to thinking this is going to be an atheist fest. But if you're an atheist, don't be switched off thinking this is going to be a big religious fest either. That being said, the topic is basically reflecting on our religions and our religious past and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, cool. I think the other thing too to point out is that you and I both have jobs. You and I both have lives. We have families.
We do.
So we've decided that we're going to keep this anonymous. So I'm going to refer to you as B.
Yep, and I will refer to you as T.
Thank you very much. That sounds good. Which may or may not be in any way reflective of our real names. I also will point out that I live near an airport, and probably what was just heard then is planes going over. So, yeah. And we're not going to do any massive edits to this either.
No.
So, if dogs bark and phones ring, fuck it.
Yeah,
Yep.
So be it.
And I think I just made it clear that we are going to swear.
Yes. It is definitely part of me. It's my core.
Yeah.
Always has been.
Yeah, cool. All right, very good. So, I was thinking, as I said to you before as well, 30-minute spots, right? 30-minute slots. So if it's all right with you, I'd like to hear from you and how you came into the whole thing.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, we ended up in what was then called the Assemblies of God in Australia, which is now, I think, called the Australian Christian Churches.
Is it?
Yeah, they changed their name, which is, by the way, the precursor to Hillsong.
Yes.
There's another plane. Thanks very much. I wonder if I should close my door.
We could.
I'll do that in a minute. It's a precursor to Hillsong. Hillsong wasn't its own standalone organisation back then, but it is now, and it was definitely part of the group that we came into. But anyway, why don't we start with, as I said, start with you, and you tell your story about how you came into it all, and I'll try and keep my mouth shut.
Oh no, that's fine. I mean, you can ask questions or say, does it make sense? Just to reflect back to me, because look, for me, I guess I grew up in a relatively spiritual family, and not to be reflective of religion or organised religion of any type, but more so a reality that there was something else out there, and this wasn't an accidental formation of life that we just come to it. And I mean, we used to explore that as a family by having family seances.
Did you really?
We did. It was a really strange thing. So
I don't think it's that strange because we used to do it too, but not as a family.
Yeah,
the kids
okay.
used to do it, but certainly mum and dad weren't involved. But at your house, mum and dad were involved.
Well, mum was involved with dad sitting in the background going, "This is a load of bullshit," and so generally he was. He wasn't overly supportive of it. But mum...
family seances.
Family seances.
With a Ouija board?
Yeah, absolutely. Ouija board quite often.
So come on, kids, let's speak to the dead.
Pretty much, yeah. It'd usually be a box of Fruity Lexia, and, mum and sisters and brothers were on board, so... But quite often, we never had a proper Ouija board. It was the cut-out paper letters and the yes and the no and with the wine glass. Yeah. And we saw some freaky stuff happen during those. And, how real it is or whether it was our minds making it happen, I don't know. But for me, I grew up always exploring and being open. Certainly had mates that were in churches and, the local Baptist church and all that sort of thing. And I found myself around Christmas and Easter's, mum saying, oh, maybe we should go to a service or something. And I'd always been like, not a hope in hell. And ended up a couple of times going along, actually with mates, just to go, what the hell's this all about? It was just a bizarre experience. Like I never related to it, and the disconnection between my own spiritual search and this institution where you went to act out whatever you were thinking. I just never got it.
So which kind of denominations or groups did you visit as a kid, and what age were you around this?
Oh, Catholic and Baptist. So I had a mate who he had to go to Mass every weekend just to keep his mum happy. So went along with him, and I found that incredibly bizarre. You sat down, you stood up. Everything seemed very scripted. Everyone knew what to say at particular times, except me. And I sat there thinking, God, I just don't feel like part of this because I wasn't part of the script that was there.
So words like liturgy would not have been in your vocabulary, even though you're experiencing it, right?
Yeah, absolutely no idea. And the Baptist, the experience was a little bit different. I went along to a youth group there with another friend from school, and it was good. It was fun, and everyone hung out. But then when it got to the religious part of it, I just disconnected. Didn't get it. So for me, I sort of went through my teenage years with that loose spirituality, the searching, the connecting, and at the time I definitely didn't think that's what I was doing. It was just happening. Fast forward, at that time I had one of my brothers. He was a surfer, very much into the surf scene, and it's the dogs. You might have noticed.
Yeah, let's ignore them. Keep going.
Yeah. He was a mad bong smoker. Bongs for brekkie, bongs for lunch, whatever. For him, he was on a bit of a bizarre path in life, and he became a Christian. And he started calling my mum and dad and being evangelistic towards them and really trying to get them in.
So what year would this have been?
It would have been about 1980, 85, 86, somewhere around there, I reckon.
Okay, and he was living in the same city and state as you?
No, he was in another state. Okay. So he'd be ringing mum and dad and preaching to the point where my dad refused to talk to him on the phone anymore. Yeah. Standing by his strong mantra of this is bullshit. Of anything spiritual. So that went on for a while. And then when I was probably 15, 16, another one of my brothers got connected into the same group. I can't even remember what Christian group it was, but it was a Pentecostal sort of fundamentalist group. And he then also started, he moved up to the same city, and they were both trying to constantly preach and reach out, and they got everyone offside. No one wanted to talk to them. When I was about 17, I decided to go and visit them, but I said that I would only stay with them on the proviso of a few things, and that was they weren't allowed to have any Bibles in the house. I just didn't want it. They weren't allowed to preach to me, not once. If they did, I would leave straight away. Because they were very, very gung-ho about it. And anyway, to their credit, both of them agreed that would be the case. Whether there's Bibles in the house, I'm sure there was, but none was certainly left out on particular pages for me to stumble across.
Hidden behind porno mag.
I'd imagine. And then I would have been fine.
That's right. Everything is in reverse when you're a fundamentalist Christian.
Yeah, it was. So for me, they did that, and they decided that they could stick by the no preaching rule. And there was something about, they had a good bunch of friends who were incredibly supportive. I'd seen a huge change, in particularly my bong-loving brother. And for him, I saw a happiness and an acceptance which I'd never seen before. And regardless of them saying that they weren't going to preach to me, they didn't have to, because it was something I saw, and I think it was something within me that went, what is this? So I started asking questions, and I started saying, what is it? What are we doing?
So you're saying that whether it was true or real or not, the change that you'd seen was legitimate?
100%. And, it was undeniable that there was something going on, and there was something, and whether it was, their connection to community, their acceptance from others, something had worked. Yeah. For them,
or even just faith, and I don't mean faith as in the object of faith, meaning it was God, but just the fact that they had faith and reasons to change.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they anchored something in some belief. I wasn't sure what it was. I had absolutely no idea. And I was probably going through a fair bit of... I was 17, didn't really know myself that well. It's a bit of a confusing time in life. And for me, I just thought, stuff it. It was my last Sunday I was going to be there. I'm going to go along to this church that they were going to and see what it's all about. And I went there, and again, it was this sense of acceptance, of community, of... I don't know, it was a different feeling. I'd never felt it before, and it was definitely a feeling. It was strange. Anyway, they had this, throughout the session, I had this real draw to find out what this was about, and they had, at the end of it, they had this thing where it was just like, hey, anyone want to know a bit more about this? Come up the front, we'll have some people talk to you. And I did that. I went up the front, and I had... people chat to me about what it was about. I didn't get it. I didn't get what they were saying. I didn't get what it would actually mean. And I certainly, fast forward a couple of years in my life, I wouldn't have known, where it was going to take me and definitely influence my thinking and my doing. But at that time, I made the decision to find out a bit more about it. And
so you made this decision. What do you think was... was it an emotional decision? Was it an academic decision? Was it a cognitive decision? Or a group of those? What do you reckon?
I didn't feel like I was in control of it in some way. I felt drawn to it, and there was no logic in it, because every part of it was hearing my dad's voice in the background going, "This is bullshit." And for me, it was a complete turnaround with that Catholic and that Baptist experience that I had a look at. They didn't make sense to me. They didn't connect, but this did. There's something about it that connected, and it didn't make sense. It still didn't make sense, but there was something in me that went, you've got to find out a bit more about this. You've got to see where it leads. Why have your brothers connected with it when you wouldn't think they would either? Yep. So, I think it was something to explore more, and that's it. That's where it led me to exploring more.
Okay.
How about you too?
Well, hold on, before we get into me, so you can't remember who this group was aligned with?
I think they were called Christian City Churches or something like that, and there was I think they were from Sydney. This wasn't the city it was in, but it was in Sydney. It was a guy who'd led it, Phil Pringle or something. I think it was connected to this guy, Phil Pringle. That's all I remember. After I returned back to where I lived from that holiday, I didn't actually have anything to do with that denomination or that movement again.
But your brothers did.
My brothers did. They stayed there.
They were aligned with that.
Yeah, they were aligned with that, and one of them continued to be aligned with that for many, many, many years, 20 plus years.
Yep.
Maybe even 30 years, because it's not that long ago. But yeah, no, for me, I came back and I still kept exploring on and off for the next couple of years, but it was with different movements and denominations, and I'd actually just hear word of mouth because it was pre-internet, so you couldn't just search where can I go. So you'd hear it. I actually got a letter from that place where I was on holidays, that church, saying, hey, you've gone back to your city where you live, here's a few places that you might want to try. One of them was connected with them. I went to it, didn't connect in the way that I did, and then found out through some other people there's some other church groups to explore. So that's where I went.
Okay, cool. And so I guess moving forward and everything, you eventually did find a place that you made sort of semi-regular. What age were you when that sort of happened?
I reckon I was 19. So
about 2 years you sort of sussed it out, came and went.
Yeah, it'd be 2 years. I mean, I probably over that next year, I connected with one place a bit more, and again, it was that fundamentalist group. They were, from memory, they were fairly independent. They weren't connected with anyone else, and again, it was a good bunch of people, and they were fairly gracious in the fact that I was pretty rough around the edges. I was fairly uncommitted to the space. I was still acting like any teenager would when I was out and about, and I didn't really connect in with their larger groups of things like they had home groups where you would all catch up at someone's home to talk about your Christianity or your journey or whatever. Bible studies. I didn't connect in with any of those. They had youth group, which I did connect in. I connected in with reasonably strongly, but again, it was the social aspect of it. I felt fairly safe in that environment, and they were fairly committed to not preaching to me. So it was. I almost felt like I had to get through the Sunday service there just to get that bit over and done with, so you could have the social stuff. So
by this stage, would you have, and thinking back to the language that they use, right?
Yeah.
Would you have committed your life to Christ, prayed the sinner's prayer, been baptized, all this kind of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. That's probably one thing I actually forgot was when I was on holidays and that, went up the front, that was one thing they did, was they said to you, will you give your life to Jesus? And I had no idea what that meant, but I went, yeah, look, I'll give it a crack.
I'll give him my crack.
Yeah,
not the whole life.
No, just the crack, just to start, So, and that's
just the tip.
Just the tip. That's right. I had the low genes, so and I did. I gave it a crack, and then really moved quite fast. They said, that was on that weekend. I was going home the end of the next weekend, and they said, next weekend we're doing baptisms in the river down the road.
Hurrah!
Yeah, and I went, I have no idea what that means. And they said, you've got to do it. It's part of the package.
Yes.
I went, okay.
It's like a shower.
Yeah, it was. And it was part of the package. And so the next week, here I am down at this local river, and there was a bunch of people. There was probably 15 at least having this baptism. I had no idea what this baptism was. I expected someone to flick a bit of water on my forehead and Bob's your uncle. But
Bob's your godfather.
Bob's your godfather. But, I got dunked completely under the water, and
Did they dress you in white robes, or were you allowed to just wear shorts and a t-shirt?
just shorts. It was board shorts and t-shirt, probably a tank top back then, 17.
Yeah.
And
And it is the 80s.
it was the 80s. Yeah, and it would have been like a tank top that said something like Jimmy Barnes or something like that, I'd imagine.
Phuket.
That's it.
I had a friend of mine in high school that had his Phuket shirt, and we all loved it because it really said "fuck it."
Yeah.
And this is back before the days before you'd been there 4 or 5 times yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, no, so they did that baptism thing. I had no idea what it meant. I had no idea why you would even do it. It wasn't really even explained to me. Perhaps it was, I don't know, but I don't remember certainly anything from it. There was nothing that stuck. I didn't feel any different when I did it, but I did it because it was part of the package. So, yeah, I'd done all that. I'd ticked the boxes that they essentially said I needed to tick to be part of what they were, but I didn't really know what they were.
So there was no initiation course or, like nowadays, you've got all these sort of courses and stuff that people do to come into Christian churches. And a big one, I think, is, at least I see the signs when I drive around. It's still big, which is Alpha.
Oh, yeah.
And they do all these sort of training courses and get you understanding. None of that happened?
No. I've seen those posters too. Bear Grylls is always the one advertising Alpha.
Oh, really? Is he religious? Is he?
Yeah.
Is he a Christian?
Yeah. Well,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, according to... They use his quotes about the Alpha course, and yeah.
Yeah, because let's face it, Christians love celebrities.
They do, and especially one that drinks his own pee.
Yeah, right.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Well, locusts and honey, drink your own pee. Fair enough. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, that's good. That's an interesting sort of journey. Where do you think then you got to the point where you sort of committed? Okay, I'm regular now, this is what I am, and you started wearing that label and maybe even started telling your friends? How did that sort of happen?
Well, this is the weird thing. Like, I was never, ever comfortable in telling my friends about what I was part of. It was something I actually always tried to keep hidden. And I saw all these people that I was within these groups being really proud of and wearing the badge of I am a Christian, I am a follower of Jesus. I was never comfortable. I actually felt incredibly awkward about it. And I think there was just so much baggage with it, and I didn't want that baggage. I didn't want that brand of, or that branding of, that's what you are and this is the mould that you fit, because it wasn't me. I was still exploring. I was still trying to make sense of it, and I wasn't as proud of flying that flag. So for me, that never happened. However, where I fully threw myself into the whole experience, I was probably 19, I'd say, and that was when I came across the Assemblies of God, and it was a large church.
Let's call it Great Big AOG.
Great Big AOG.
That can be the name that we use for this church.
Sounds
so we
good.
don't get sued.
Yes.
As we start to share stories that maybe identify people that they don't want to be told, let's just call it Great Big AOG.
Look at it, it was huge, but it was also incredibly welcoming. It was a well-oiled machine. There is no doubt about that. I felt at home there. I felt accepted there. Probably for the first few months, we were the new and shiny, because I actually started going there with another mate. And
had he come from your previous churches?
No, he hadn't. He actually, we'd been mates since we were about 10 years old, and he had recently gone through a similar thing, completely separate to me and completely without my knowledge, of giving his life over to Jesus, and he rang me one day and he goes, "Oh, I've just done this." I said, "What the hell?" But he was a lot more into it than I was. I still love the social aspect of it, so we thought we'd check this place out. And we checked it out together, and we were definitely the new and shinies. We were accepted. People were enjoying us being there, and I think people saw us as coming from the outside. And
fresh blood,
and an opportunity for them to be able to. For them, if I look back on it, it was probably they were trying to connect with something that they weren't part of as well, because it was a very insular institution. I can look back at it through my eyes now, and definitely there was a lot of cultish type behaviour. You were captured within a net, and if you went outside of that defined area, you were seen to be, often labelled as worldly. So, which pointed the finger at you to be someone who wasn't part of them. So, for me, it was someone who wanted to connect with something and someone so deeply. To be named something you weren't part of, it made you steer away from that and come back into the fold.
It's funny, because when you talk about coming along for the first time, I remember the first few times that I went along to that group, I was also, I guess, fresh meat, fresh blood, and it was actually a lot of the girls that came up and started talking to me at first, because I think a lot of them were like looking for husbands and this kind of thing. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I think that was something that most certainly happened in that space.
So I sensed that as well. That and that, like you said, they were very insular. So they were always looking for it's almost like jail. What's it like on the outside? And that kind of thing. Funny enough, though, those kids, because we were kids then, they were also going to school and stuff.
Yeah.
But I guess they were looking for sort of like a bridge between their religious life, which they were possibly and often truly very committed to, but also wanting to be, in inverted commas, normal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think they thought they were normal.
Yeah.
Like, because their situation was so normalised, they thought that they were relating, but I feel awkward thinking back about just that. Like, they thought what they were involved in was normal and it was all part of what everyone should be doing, but the reality is it was so removed from reality, and it was not reflective of the greater world that we lived in. And I think
society,
and they wore that as a badge because they saw that point of difference in, well, that's what stands us apart, and that's what makes us authentic, because we are part of a greater movement which is more authentic because it has Jesus at the centre of it.
It's God's people, isn't it?
God's people, that's correct.
God's chosen, yeah. All right, well, that's really good. So I think, that's a good wrap to our first session.
Yeah.
While the dogs try and come back in.
Welcome, dogs.
Yeah. So I will. Yeah. How about we stop there, and then we'll look at next time we get together, maybe I'll tell my story and we'll talk about how I sort of connected with it all, and we'll leave it there for today. So hope you enjoyed the first session of I Was a Teenage Fundamentalist.
Yeah,
very good.
That's good.